Okay. Meeting is called to order and recording.
Okay. All right. What I'd like to do, board members, is I am going to open. I have a statement that I want.
I'm gonna take it upstairs. We'll do this for 5 more minutes.
Somebody's talking. Okay, there we go. I am going to open with a statement, and I am going to share the letter that our committee put together, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Medanski because some things have happened today that I want to share with everybody on the board. So on January 27th, a 3-person bipartisan committee of our board was formed to develop a letter to be sent to the governor, state legislators, and the State Department of Education regarding the next steps for an exit strategy from pandemic mandates. Each committee member obviously has his own viewpoints on mandates, local control, and masks, and yet they were all able to work together to successfully craft a document that asked the needed questions so that our schools could be prepared. Joe, Jasper, and Zaya, thank you for your work. Your work keeping the best interests of the children of Southington first and foremost in what you wrote and how you wrote it. So I would like to now read their letter. To the Honorable Governor Lamont, State Legislature, and Department of Education. Thank you for your service to our state during the COVID-19 health emergency. We submit this letter as a unified Board of Education that continues to defend mandates as a matter of public health and law. We know every instruction has been penned with the health and the wellness of our staff, students, and family at its core. We are now 2 years post the start of this pandemic and emergency. During that time, the world and the state of Connecticut, having benefited from research and development of treatments that has helped to prevent and treat COVID-19. Data, most importantly, has made major contributions to appropriate guidance for procedure and policy that had not been available at the beginning of the pandemic. With the governor's executive powers expiring in February, he has asked that lawmakers review and codify those existing executive orders they feel are necessary. We are encouraged by this move, knowing that these decisions are moving from the governor to the legislature, thus involving the full government of the state of Connecticut. These decisions should be assisted with input from health, medical, and mental health experts and be openly discussed to include our state and municipal representatives and those they represent. As the Southington Board of Education, we are asking for a definitive exit strategy from the pandemic mandates so that Southington can prepare for the next step. What specific metrics must be met to remove each of the standing orders, both on a state and local level? We are confident in our elected boards, administrator, health director, and employees to effectively implement mitigation strategies. These strategies will minimize the interruption of services while keeping the health and safety at the forefront. Thank you again for your time and your service to the state and her communities. Now, that is the letter that our 3 committee members wrote together in a bipartisan effort. Now, I'd like to turn it over to Steve because there's more information that has come up as of today. So, Steve.
Thank you, Mrs. Clark. Clearly, the governor's press conference yesterday, I think, created a good amount of confusion and misinformation within the media, essentially leading a large faction of the community to believe that it is going to be a local decision whether or not masks are going to be required after the legislation takes action. And I wanted to just provide a little background information that I got today relative to the governor's announcement. And I think it clarifies some of the confusion and misinformation that's out there. I think to start, it's important to know that logistics regarding the packaged bill, which would include all 11 executive orders, are still being worked out at the legislative level, and no one has seen the actual bill yet, nor is the legislature in session until Thursday. So that's just a codifying statement that I think people need to be aware of. So while the governor may have made his announcement yesterday, there's been no action by the legislation legislature on any end, indicating what's to come next. And I want to explain why that's important. So bear with me here for a little bit. My understanding at this point is if the bill is passed, it will use the same language currently in use regarding executive orders, which include masking guidance, delegated to the Commissioner of the State Department of Education. So any action that's taken regarding a bill doesn't say that the governor has the authority to both invoke a mask mandate or do away with, nor localities. It essentially provides the same authority to the Commissioner of the State Department of Education as it did back in September, that she is to issue guidance regarding mask wearing or lifting the mask requirement, if you will. So now I know if you've seen any of the press conferences or media releases, she indicated last night that she would be sending out revised guidance. My inference with that being said is that then clearly it's going to be lifted, because you wouldn't revise something if you weren't changing anything. You follow me? So it's, although she didn't publicly announce it, it was inferred. I think in addition to that, if the commissioner issues guidance indicating that masks are no longer required, and this is important for our community, that effectively ends the mask mandate. And the only way it can be continued or resumed is if one of two things happens. One, the local Board of Education raises and adopts a mandatory mask policy. That would be up to you. I couldn't say masks are required, nor at that point would the commissioner's guidance, if you will, trump. You essentially would have to adopt a mask policy. Or the Commissioner of Education revises her mask guidance, let's say at a later date, to again require masks if another variant, if you will, came along and she felt the need to do so. So there was a lot of emails that I received today from families, and I'm sure many of you received them as well, as where people are saying, please don't lift the mask mandate. There is no such thing as lifting the mask mandate or not. If the commissioner revises the guidance that says masks are no longer required, that ends the mandate. And so at that point, the only way it would be revisited, I'm going to just repeat this for clarification's sake, is if this board were to raise and adopt a mandatory mask policy, or if at a later date, the commissioner decides to revise her mask guidance and again, require them. There will be some metrics so in the guidance that we receive associated with, by at least by one health official as what they consider the most reliable health data right now, and that's the hospitalization rate. The indications that we have are that they don't think the testing rate or the positivity rate are all that reliable right now because less people are getting tested now that the surge has subsided. So they may be carrying it without, without ever even knowing themselves. And secondly, people may be taking the tests at home and not reporting the results, which could lead you to an artificially low number that would even exist in your community. But with that said, they do believe that the hospitalization rates are a reliable number because, let's face it, if you're admitted to the hospital with COVID, they at least have that rate. Now, I understand people would dispute with hospitalization rates even there. There's questions about whether people with pre-existing conditions are being admitted to the hospital and then end up COVID positive. That's certainly, a factor to consider. That's certainly not something I see the commissioner considering in her masking guidance for schools. It's more a matter of what are the prevalence rates. And, based on DPH's statement yesterday afternoon, she feels now is a safe time to lift the masking requirements based on current rates in the state. And another area that I think could be considered a gray area, but it's relative to this, and I think it's relative to your letter in terms of questions and metrics. We were informed that if the commissioner does lift the mask mandate and our board takes no policies and adopts anything requiring masks, that our pre-K programs will also no longer be required to wear masks if they're in our buildings. So essentially any preschool classes that are under our jurisdiction, if we lift or if the commissioner lifts the mask requirement and we do not adopt a masking policy, then that essentially lifts the mask requirement for preschools as well. That does not apply to early learning centers and childcare centers. That will be separate guidance issued through Commissioner Bai from the Office of Early Childhood. The other piece that there was conversation about, which is we received clarification this afternoon, and I'm not sure how they'll navigate through this within the legislation, if there's any action taken, is school buses. So school buses right now currently fall under CDC guidance, which is federal. And to public transportation right now, there is a requirement to wear masks. So that is not up to the Commissioner of Education or the Governor of the state of Connecticut. That is a federal guidance right now relative to public transportation and CDC. Now, if CDC revised their guidance to say masks are not required, either on public transportation or more specifically school buses, then certainly we could lift the mask requirement for school buses. But we don't expect that that'll be addressed within the commissioner's guidance because it's beyond her authority or jurisdiction to do so. So I think that the debate, the thing that was most misleading was the headline, and the people I spoke to today, I kind of indicated that the headline of Governor Lamont repeals the mask mandate and leaves the decisions to local municipalities is somewhat incomplete and misleading, because the reality of the matter is if the governor's orders are not extended on February 15th, that ends the mask mandate and there's no decision to be had by local boards of education, unless, again, you adopt a policy requiring masks. And secondly, even if his powers are extended, the commissioner is going to issue revised guidance, which essentially lifts the mask mandate and makes it no longer a requirement. Why does this mean your letter still may be important? I think it still allows your legislators an opportunity to hear what you feel about mitigation strategies and how they're best left to the local municipalities prior to them taking any action. I believe the House is going to be acting on February 10th, and the Senate is going to be acting on either the 14th or the 15th, as last I heard. So I know that was a lot. Thanks for bearing with me. Questions that people may have. I mean, it is very different than what I think we were all led to believe. But I think in some ways, a lot more straightforward, to be honest with you.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So you mentioned that there was a different policy, the CDC for school buses. Now, is that a decision that because we contract out to New Britain Transportation, is that something that they control and not something we control?
No, it would be something, it's really controlled. They're considered public transportation, regardless. We contract with them to provide public transportation, which is what we have to do by law. And so because they're categorized as public transportation, they fall under the jurisdiction right now of the CDC in terms of the federal guidance.
But their policy, I guess, as a company, that controls mask usage on the bus for our students, right? Not our policies. Is that
correct?
It wasn't even their company policy. That was the federal guidance that we have to adhere to. They have to adhere to it as a company, just like we do as a district.
Gotcha. Okay.
Steve, something I'd be interested to know is what happens if our students, like say for sports or for events where they may be traveling to another district, if another district has different policies, I'd be interested to know how that's going to be worked.
I know the answer to that, and I have two updates for you on that front. First of all is the CIAC petitioned the state yesterday, DPH and CSTE, to lift the mask requirement for all athletics effective February 10th. They've not gotten a response to that yet, but I believe it is as a result of a few major sporting events that they have that are larger in nature related to track and field, and they don't want the kids to be masked up for this. But as of this evening, I didn't get an answer to that yet. As of the way we do it right now, Jasper, it's basically, and it's the same way we did it for fans, because some had you could allow fans, some you couldn't allow fans. Some wanted all the players to wear the masks. Some, when you were playing, you didn't have to wear the mask, that kind of stuff. What we do is you abide by whatever the host district's rules are. So let's say there was a district like Hartford Public Schools, and we're going to go play a basketball game against Hartford Public School. If they have a local Board of Education policy in Hartford that says masks must be worn during athletic events, then their athletic director or their administrator is required to enforce that policy, not only for the home team, but also guests and visitors. Just like our administrators are responsible for enforcing our policies, regardless of who the person is that's on the campus, someone from a visiting team or otherwise. I'll use smoking as a simple example. Just because you may be allowed to smoke where your district is, although you shouldn't because you should have a policy against it, somewhat of a poor example, but for layman's sake, our administration would have to enforce that no smoking policy just because you are from another school. So whenever they have a policy, that's what needs to be followed.
Yeah, I anticipated as much. I was just curious. I wanted to make sure that was clarified.
Yeah, good question.
Now, does anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, I have one question. Steve, I think I'm inferring from what you said that you think we should go ahead and send our letter or a resolution that we did right, which, by the way, thank you to Zaya, Joe, and Jasper. Very well done. I read it and it's perfect. So I thank you for your hard work on that. Am I getting the inference from you that you think we should go ahead and do that, because we do need answers to those questions, is what you're saying to me? Is that correct?
Well, I think your letter raises the point that no formal action has been taken at the legislative level yet. So
Right.
prior to any action being taken, to send something to your delegation telling them how you feel and what you desire to get from the state in terms of guidance, I think is very fair. But I think ultimately it's your board's decision whether or not to just send the letter. I would not decide for you.
Okay, thank you.
Joe?
Colin, may I ask a question?
Sure.
So Steve, as our superintendent, do you feel comfortable in a sense of, what our letter essentially speaks to? And again, I guess putting you essentially in the hot seat, as well as, this board, as far as, again, being able to have that, I guess, the local control that the governor was alluding to during his press conference, but essentially, do you feel that with, I guess, the inferences from the Department of Education, as well as, our own public health official, and with this board, that essentially it would be a reasonable ask and undertaking, given the current, I guess, I'm hoping the laxing of mandates and that type of thing, or relaxing rather, that sending this letter, it's not putting you in a tough space or anything like that. And again, like that's my biggest take from doing this letter is I'm not looking to put anybody into any sort of position where they feel uncomfortable, or that we can't manage the health and safety of our students and mitigation strategies, et cetera. I'm sorry, a long way of saying, do you feel comfortable with this as our superintendent?
I've said all along that we will do what the state and local health officials say is best, what's recommended, which is what we've done up to this point. Yep. I think we heard them all say yesterday afternoon that they're comfortable with this strategy at this point in time, given the current case rates and numbers. And so I'd be disingenuous to say I don't feel comfortable with something they're saying now, when I've said all along I feel comfortable with what they're saying. So with that being said, Joe, I think I feel very comfortable. I think our prevalence rates in the district are very low right now. And I think, we've heard from many community members. I know you received many of the emails that I did right now, that they're ready for life to return to normal. And I think it's important to mention, with that being said, that many families may still choose to wear a mask to school. And as many of our parents have said, a parent's choice is what matters most to them. So I don't foresee that being an issue. I think if a parent wants to choose to send their child to school with a mask on, we don't know people's individual life circumstances, whether they have medically fragile, family members in their home and whatnot. So I think that's their right, if they feel like that offers them a layer of protection. But with that said, I think we're 2 years now, or approaching 2 solid years in March of 2020 of dealing with this. And I think everyone would be relieved if we could move on in a safe fashion. And the commissioner of DPH yesterday said she feels comfortable, repealing that strategy right now as a mitigation strategy. So if that's how she feels, that's how I feel.
Okay, great. And just a quick side note, again, talk about something that bipartisan, Zaya, myself, and Jasper, I think we all have our different takes on it, and, not to belabor an issue, but, to sort of sit down and kick around this document and come up with something where it really does play to the core of in my opinion, how we all feel about the situation, and asking for continued guidance and just a little bit more of a transparency, if you will. Again, like I'm absolutely honored to be on the committee with the two of you gentlemen, and thank you very much for again, just for a seamless experience, and again, respectful, and it was fantastic. So thank you again.
Yeah,
I
thanks,
was going to
Brian.
give the three of you the opportunity to speak. So Jasper, why don't you say something about the process or whatever you want to say?
Yeah, no, sure. I just echo the same sentiments that have already been shared. I thought the committee came together well, listened to one another, respected each other's ideas, and ultimately we were able to produce something that we all believed in. And I think that's what kind of gives our message weight and credibility. It's not a partisan issue. This is a bipartisan problem that everybody's facing, and it's just nice to see everybody work together and be able to put something out that addresses our concerns. So thanks to both of you.
And Zaya?
Agreed. I think we came in, it doesn't matter what your perspective was. We each brought our perspective to the table. We talked through it. We had some good discussion. And in the end, it doesn't matter what side of this position you take. What we're asking for is information. What we're asking for is data. And data is going to drive these decisions now and into the future. So we want to know what the metrics are that are going to trigger the X, Y, and Z. Without that data, we're just throwing darts in the air, and it's not going to tell us anything. So I'm pretty pleased with what we came up with. I think it was a great collaboration, yeah, I thank you, both you gentlemen. I think it was a very good experience.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions for Steve? Sean, I can't see you, so if you do.
No,
Nope.
I'm,
Okay.
yeah,
You're
no,
good?
I'm pleased with the discussion and, overall, working together and, with the administration and amongst ourselves as board members and, just seeing what the state is doing and, just let them know that, that this is at the forefront of our minds, both for us, our administrators, and throughout our entire school district, students, parents, teachers, everyone involved, and I think it sends the right message at the right time. So I'm fully on board with what we've come up with.
Terrific. Okay, so Mr. Medancy.
Just one last thought I want to share with the board as a whole. In terms of coming together and from my perspective, and Joe talked about this, in terms of Steve, how do you feel? Obviously you feel what your board feels as their one lone hire, right? And so when you know that your board supports this as a logical next step, it makes it a lot easier for me to feel comfortable with this. With that said, I've never governed by my opinion. And I've said that to people who have asked my opinion a million times. I may have had a very different opinion along the way here with what we've done or what was required of us. But my job is, as is yours, as an extension of the State Board of Education, is to enforce the laws and policies that we are charged with. And so that's what I've done. And so I just thank the board for working together with me through this difficult time this past 20 months, because it has not been easy for sure. And I think you guys have all stuck together and asked really good questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Medancy. And may I just say how very proud I am to be a member of this board that is able to work through, regardless of what your opinions are, you're able to do what is in the best interest of kids. And that's what we're here for. So what I'd like to do now is to take a consensus to see who is, although, may I ask Mr. Parliamentarian, Mr. Medancy, is it possible for us to vote on this? Or do we just take a consensus and I sign it on behalf of the board?
Yeah, a vote is not necessary. You can just
Okay.
take a consensus because essentially we've talked about the document ad nauseum. How everyone feels. And so if, similar to what we've done in the past with chairman, if they make a statement on behalf of the board, it's with the authority of the board to do so, or the blessing, I should say. So consensus would suffice.
Okay, so then we can take a consensus of the board So I will ask Jasper.
Yes.
Yes? Dawn? Yes. Okay. Terry?
Yes.
Yes,
Dave?
Yes.
Zaya?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. Okay.
All right. I think no other items on the agenda.
There
Somebody need
are
to
no
make
other,
Mr. Darrenowski?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Can I ask, can I ask real quick, can we get an electronic
Sure.
copy of that? If somebody
Yeah, I
has it?
sent it to you.
Oh, you
Oh,
did?
the final, yeah,
Yeah, the final.
what I've done, I sent it and I believe Teresa has one. She'll send the, do the copy
Perfect.
with, yeah. And I'll get that out to everybody. Okay,
I'd love an
Mr.
opportunity to
Medancy.
sign it, whatever we end up
Huh?
sending.
When
I'd
will
love an
this
go?
opportunity to sign whatever we're sending.
Colleen, when will
I-
this go out to the legislative?
I'm gonna say tomorrow, would it not? Could we not
I
get it
don't
out, Mr.
know.
Medancy? Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
I would say, given that we know the House is taking action on February 10th, that if you could get it out tomorrow, that'd be perfect. And then I just checked my notes while we were, you guys were convening, and then February 14th is when the Senate will take it out,
okay.
Okay,
which
okay,
is Monday.
okay. So I would sign on behalf of everyone, on behalf of the board.
Yeah, as long as
Okay.
they give you their blessing, you can do that.
Yeah,
Okay?
Okay.
okay. We all good with that?
Yeah, we are
All
adjourned.
right, so I'll take care of that. I'll go down, I'll be down at the board office tomorrow then to sign off.
Okay.
Okay, and we'll get it out.
Thank you, everybody.
Well
Thank
done,
you,
everyone.
everyone.
Well done.
Good evening, all.
Good night, thank
Have a
you.
good evening.
Thank
Good night.
All of you too. Good night.
Okay, bye.